Welcome, everyone, to the Dying Your Way podcast. It's my honor today to have Dr. Fred Mirarchi, and he is one of the leading voices that is contributing so much to the conversation about advanced care planning and about death literacy in general. He is an emergency room doctor in the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in Erie, Pennsylvania. And he is also the founder of the Institute on Healthcare Directives. He's a published author of many medical studies and articles, and he's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and appeared on my favorite podcast, Z-Dog MD. I love that interview with him. So welcome, Dr. Mirarchi. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know how busy you are and that you're coming onto the podcast today. It really means a lot to me. And it means a lot to the listeners too. A lot of the listeners are part of the choir and they have, a understanding about advanced care directives, but there are also people that really, if they were honest, would say they haven't even thought about it. So
sure.
One of the things that I want us to talk about is how important it is to have certain things in place. But before we get started, maybe you could just shine a light on why this is a subject that is so important to you. Yeah.
Oh, sure. First and foremost, thanks for having me. I know it's a different time in your country, so but very important topic. And as far as why I'm passionate about the topic, so it all goes back to experiences, right? Most of our life experiences kind of really direct us in where we go and essentially what we become and what we do in our research and what we decide to tout as being important. So I found out a really long time ago in my training that living wills, do not resuscitate orders, and these medical orders that are physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment essentially can be a patient safety issue. And early on in my training, I was taking care of a young lady who was nearing a cardiac arrest, and I came running to the bedside with all this energy to take care of her. And I had a nurse basically flashing a piece of paper in front of me, which was a living will, screaming, "She's a DNR, don't treat her, don't shock her." And I was paralyzed. I was completely paralyzed by it. And this lady was dying in front of me, and I was fortunate. There was a cardiologist who happened to be in the room, tossed me aside, literally, picked up old-fashioned paddles, shocked her heart, and she came back to life, and we treated her heart attack, and she went home to her family. But had that been me with those documents, that lady would have died.
Right.
And then later on in my residency, I figured out that, I was taking care of, it was literally probably the week before I finished my training in residency. And I took care of an older gentleman who was in his 60s and was very infected, what we call sepsis, and he was dying, and he had a living will. And this time I'm like, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again. So then I resuscitated him like to the end all be all, right? I put him on ventilators. I put special catheters into his veins and saved his life. And 30 minutes later, his wife showed up, who was a frail little old lady who essentially, he overwhelmed at home, and he was dying. He was in hospice. He had end-stage prostate cancer. And then I'm like, wow, so I totally screwed up again. And as life went on, I started doing research because, well, I take that back. I wrote a book. People said, hey, you should write a book about this, help people learn. And then it was funny, when we wrote the book, it did well. It was a book called Understanding Your Living Will. And people would come to me and say, you have no research. So I said, okay, let's start doing research. And then from that, we essentially published almost 13 studies now in research called the Triad Research Series.
They're quite detailed. I've read them. They're amazing.
Well, thank you. And, we started to show with research that this is really a national patient safety issue, and not just a national patient safety issue in the United States, but more of a global issue across the world.
Yes.
Because medical professionals really just don't know what to do with these types of documents. Yes. They think if you have a document, they need to follow it. And that's not what those documents are intended for. So from that, I tried to figure out ways to fix it. and try and make it so that we can keep people safe. And that's where we figured out how to create what's called scripted video, and MIDEO developed from there.
So I want to get into that in a minute, but what I'm hearing you say is that there's a real national, global issue about doctors misinterpreting and over medicalizing or under medicalizing an emergency room event where the patient cannot speak for themselves, and they don't have, maybe they have the paperwork, but maybe it's too chaotic to thoroughly understand it, or what is those scenarios that doctors are dealing with in an emergency room when the patient can't speak for themselves?
Sure, but first, to clear it up, this is not just an emergency room. You can show up in a hospital for an elective procedure, and the medical teams and the surgeons will misinterpret your documents. In fact, there was a Dear Abby article that was just published, where a gentleman was with his wife, and the anesthesiologist wasn't taking care of her or was letting her die because she had a living will, and he thought she was a DNR, and that lady died. And people seem to think, oh, because the living will wasn't there, that she wasn't treated. No, if the living will is there, it's just going to reinforce their thought process to not treat her.
Yeah.
So this happens in emergency departments. It happens in the regular hospital systems, in the ambulances that take you to the hospital, in the operating room. And what happens is that people have assumptions. They have assumptions from their training, and they think they know what they're supposed to do, and they think they know what the document means. But the reality is they've never been trained.
Right.
Most of the stuff that happens is really on the job training. I mean, no one ever sat down with me to tell me what a living will is or show me how to interpret it. It happens. And
you mean in medical school, nobody explained any of that to you at any point?
They mentioned advanced directives, and they mentioned living wills, but they never put them in clinical context, right? In scenarios where you're supposed to figure out, okay, this patient really is terminal despite sound medical treatment, or this person really is end stage. And that's when these documents are supposed to come into effect. Think about it. If you're infected, and you could be infected from something as simple as a urinary tract infection, you become bacteremic, you can become septic, you will lose your faculties, you'll lose your mental faculties because you can't speak for yourself anymore.
Yeah.
And if you show up with a document and can't speak for yourself, and even if you speak for yourself, you run the risk of not receiving care that you'd want to receive.
Right.
And that's a very important and a very scary thing.
Yeah. So there's a doctor that I know here in Australia, and she was doing a shift, and she was relating to me that there were 6 people on that shift that you would consider end stage or close to end stage, which that many people, that was alarming right there. But that of those people, one of them had paperwork done. I mean, and the rest of them, because she was concerned, she was trying to call the brother in London, or, the sister, across the continent or something. And it was just really challenging for people to even have the paperwork. So even what I'm hearing you say is, even with the paperwork, that's not enough.
No, and quite frankly, so if you have paperwork, really, it's just a step. Right? It'll actually potentially put you at risk as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the paperwork, you at least have the ability for them to treat you first and let the dust settle. But it's important to get the right stuff in order.
Yeah.
Right? And when you say that, 6 people were in the ward and they didn't have documents or so on. So as you age, and it starts probably around 40 or so. Like, they always tout that 20 to 30% of people have advanced directives, and that it needs to be much higher. Well, when you're 30 or 40, it may be 20%. When you're 50, it starts to climb. When you're 60, it starts to climb. When you're 70, it starts to climb. 80, 90, and even 100 today. The percentages just start taking this rapid upstroke as far as who has documents and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And just as far as numbers, even if you took 30% of the population, right? Take the United States, that's 300 million people, 30% of the population. All of a sudden, you got 90 million living wills in existence. So, I mean, it's not a small number. And when you look at the impact of that percentage and how it impacts you, your husband, your kids, your family. I mean, it has a pretty far-reaching effect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I actually have it queued up that I could show on Zoom, for the people that are going to be seeing this on YouTube and on my website. I've got it queued up where I can actually do a demonstration of MIDEO, and I'm going to have to talk about it so the people that are hearing it can kind of get an idea about how cool this is. Do you want me to do the demo and then you talk about it, or do you want to talk about it and then well,
go ahead and show it.
Okay, so here's the card. This is my husband Terry's card. And we're here in Australia, so it has US phone numbers on it. It has his Australia phone number on it. But at the bottom of it, there's what they call a QR code, which you've seen, but maybe you didn't know what it was. But anytime you see this QR code, you can get your smartphone out, and you can just take a picture with your camera, and then a Vimeo video pops up, and I'm going to play that right now, and you'll see what a oral video MIDEO advanced care directive is like, and then we're going to have Dr. Mirarchi explain it after we do it. You're gonna love it. It's so cool.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mirarchi from the Institute on Healthcare Directives, and I'm validating this message.
Hello, I am Terence Andrew Mepham, and this is my informed decision on video. My treatment choices are for both CPR and ACLS to be performed if my cardiac arrest is witnessed. If my cardiac arrest is unwitnessed with a perceived prolonged downtime and signs of death, then there is to be no trial of CPR. My date of birth is 11th of April 1955, and this message has been validated by the Institute of Healthcare Directives. My mind is sound as I voluntarily record this MIDEO safety statement. Please follow your trauma, cardiac, stroke, and sepsis treatment protocols. If I develop an end-stage medical condition despite sound medical treatment, a persistent vegetative state or state of advanced dementia, then please see the instructions contained in my advanced care directive and contact my medical power of attorney or power of attorney medical, who is my wife, Claire O'Berry, as you see here sitting next to me, at Australian number 61458418252, or American cell phone of 940-389-9486. I record this on the 29th of June 2020. Thank you very much, and I hope you get it right, and I'd like to see you at the end of it all.
Got a little humor in there at the end.
So that little end bit, I have people who talk about their dog, cat, their favorite sports team, go Broncos. It's kind of amazing to me. And I don't tell people what to say at the end. I tell them if they want to customize their video or MIDEO, it's fine. Let's just keep it short and keep it appropriate, just because I know people actually are wanting to save this or some sort of memory effect after too. But I think a big thing to note here is you're in Australia. I'm in the United States right now, and that came up pretty, right? So, we built the system essentially to be global and to be retrieved within 15 seconds of scanning with any kind of a smartphone, to actually pull you up, giving real information to the medical teams that they understand, so that they get the right care for you at the right time for you. And it's regardless if you want to receive treatment or if you want end-of-life care treatment. We don't really have a preference. We're just trying to make sure that we're getting it right for you.
Yeah, and we had that session with you before we did the video where it was like, it was on Zoom, but it was like we were in the doctor's office with you. And I have to say there was, a lot of training and education that I've had about it. And still, when I was in the room with you, I had new awareness and understanding about how I was looking at my end of life scenario. And what you explained to me is that, I really have every reason to live right now. And where normally I just go, hey, I just want palliative care, and just, I probably could have shaved 10 years off of my life easy if I hadn't had that conversation with you. And then what we put on the card is something that I understood. I mean, I understand what's on the card and I understand what we did, but it was you writing a script that a doctor would understand. That was what was, I think, and every doctor I've shown it to here in Australia, just their jaw drops when they see it. They're so happy to see it. Yeah, they love it.
So you said it yourself here, and this is what I want people to realize. Many people watching your podcast right now, or your show right now, are planners, right? And they're very comfortable with death. But just because you're comfortable with death doesn't mean you're ready to die tomorrow, right? Okay, and that's the problem. The health system thinks because you have your documents, you're ready to die and to refuse aggressive life-saving treatment. That's not the case. Again, we take a look at patients. We took a look at you as a person. We looked at your medical risk factors and so on. And we said, hey, you got lots of longevity here. Why would you want a DNR order now?
Yeah.
This makes no sense.
Yeah.
And we want to put those things in place for when you need them and not put you in harm's way, because I guarantee you, going into any kind of a healthcare system, they have perceptions of what do not resuscitate orders are. Yeah. They have perceptions about what living wills are. And it puts you at risk. So now you have something that can speak for you and clarify your documents. And you hear me when I tell you this, and when I saw you as a patient, I tell you, keep your documents in a file. Keep them in a file. Take your MIDEO card with you. Show it when you go into a healthcare system. Make sure they see it. Make sure they understand your wishes. You're not a DNR order. You're a full code at this stage in the game in your life. And no one should be talking you out of it at this point in time.
Right.
What we need to do is have those kinds of discussions with patients that have serious illness that are more towards the second, third, and last stages of their illness, not in the beginning phases.
Yeah. So for people that are listening that don't have anything in place, I mean, if you were going to say it's a family member, someone, what are the steps? Step 1, step 2, what are the steps they need to put in place, and in the order they need to put them in place, in your opinion?
Well, so I'm biased, right? Because I have an entity, I have a product here. So, I mean, my belief system is everybody should have a MIDEO. If you have a paper document, you need a MIDEO. If you have a paper document in existence already, you really need a MIDEO. If you don't have a paper document in place, you need a MIDEO before you start creating your documents. Okay. And we'll guide you through that process of what documents you need. If you're at this stage in the game, then you need a living will. Right? And if you're at a different stage of the game, we might say you need a pulse document. So it really depends on what you look like as far as your medical risk profile for what we're going to tell people to put in place, or we'll create for them that will put it in place for them to begin with. But the first and foremost is to have a discussion with us so we can make sure that you realize what your value is in life. Yeah. Because everybody talks to you, and there's been lots of promotional steps to get people comfortable with death. But just because you're comfortable, again, it doesn't mean you're ready to die tomorrow. Many people have grandkids. They want to see weddings. They have life expectancy in their retirement, and they should be able to enjoy that safely as they traverse the system.
So see, I want to explain to the audience about Pulse, because they don't have it in Australia, but that's a physician's order for life-sustaining treatments, correct?
Correct.
So that is an appointment that you make with your doctor. You have a conversation, you really talk about end of life scenarios, and you are at the end of your life when you're having that conversation, or should be, I'm guessing. And that is a document that allows you to basically, it's a hot pink document, I understand, and it travels with you wherever you go. You could go to your granddaughter's wedding in Virginia if you live in Georgia, and that is have the freedom to go and do what you want to do and know that that order is going to be followed. But what I got from your triad studies is that it was shocking to me, and I'm jumping around here, but that the emergency room people, you know, I mean, the EMTs that pick you up are going to misinterpret whatever your documents are 90%. The nurses are going to misinterpret it 80%, and the doctors are going to misinterpret it 70%. I mean, those are just numbers off my head, but it was something like that that was that shocking. So even if you have a pulse document, you need to have the MIDEO card.
Absolutely. First and foremost, as you mentioned, like you were saying, the pulse could be for the end of life and so on, but they've expanded their indications, and other health systems and other payers essentially try and enforce them to create those documents and so on, or incentivize providers to create those documents, which is a terrible thing. And those documents were initially created for the last year of life for people and the frail elderly patients, and now they've expanded their reach into serious illness. And it's not a regulated document, so providers, if they want to use it in a specific population, they can use it however they want and see fit. But the reality of it is, though, is again, that document is it's a good document, but it's subjected to the consequences of everything else that a living will is subjected to. There's misinterpretation, there's order creation errors, there's training errors. So just because you have a pulse document doesn't mean you're safe. It in some respects, it puts you at more risk. So, and again, that's why we like to combine with our patients. We combine MIDEO with a pulse. We combine MIDEO with a living will. We see what you need, and to make sure that we do it right for you.
Yeah, and I love having the MIDEO card, giving it to my doctor. They scan it into my records, so they have it in their records. And I haven't talked to my attorney, but I know that I gave you the address and that you sent the information to my attorney as well. So that's a step on my end and my responsibility that I need to follow up with the attorney and be sure that he understands, you know, that we do need to update my documents to match the MIDEO card. Really?
Yes and no. You know, when you create a living will, the majority of people create living wills with all the checkbox checked as no. No to intubation, no to mechanical ventilation, no to CPR, no, but it's when they're terminal or persistently vegetative. So technically you only need to do that once. And the time that you date and validate that living will should exist entirely. Your MIDEO may need to change in time, which is easy to do, but your MIDEO may need to change in time to reflect your current medical conditions. And that's why we treat you as a patient. You essentially see us, and then we risk stratify you to come back. We coordinate with attorneys and doctors and even hospital systems too, to make sure that that information gets appropriately placed into your medical records. Because again, the doctors inside the healthcare system are looking to records. We built MIDEO to be both inside the medical record as well as outside the medical record, because a lot of times doctors really don't want to be inside the medical record because it's a computerized clunky system, and usually computerized clunky systems don't work that well with patient care.
Well, I'm working with another advanced care planning educator, doula from Australia, and we're really going to try to do what we can to promote it over here. I mean, who knows when I'm going to get back to the United States, but fortunately most of my work is online anyway. But I just think this MIDEO card and the relationship with your institute just adds such value to the work that I do as a patient advocate and as an end-of-life doula, you know, because it's just made me look at this whole issue in a much more in-depth, thorough way, because I'm really following the example that you were with me. You were very thorough in how you were one-on-one with me and how you were with Terry. And it takes that kind of interest and advocacy, you know, to make that happen. So.
Well, I think you said it there, interest. You have to care. If you don't care, you're just going to keep doing what everyone's telling you to do, as far as just get a living will or get a pulse and do this and do that. you have to care about the people you're taking care of and your clients and your patients. And I'm glad you found the training with your voice directives to be beneficial.
It was great.
The end of life doula group, in my mind, has been sold a bad bill of goods. And that's why we created that training, to essentially create or make you an advanced care planning educator, to make you aware of what's actually happening in the space, the type of documents that exist, how they play out, and to make it so that you're now that patient safety advocate for your patient or your client. Because again, you have to care. If you don't care, you'll just keep doing stuff as it is today.
Yeah, I mean, and I've worked with too many people that, it was just so chaotic at the end because, that paperwork wasn't clear, or there was no paperwork, or the person that was named as, the proxy was not able to do it. I mean, it's just a whole area that needs so much attention, and it needs a really strong advocate to be there for that person if they can't speak for themselves. And we're just talking about if they can't speak for themselves, really. So anyway, I have to ask you before, because we were talking a little bit before about the how it is over here in Australia with the coronavirus and the pandemic and everything. And definitely things aren't normal, but it's nothing like what I'm hearing on the news in the United States. So you're in the emergency room, you're in the hospital, you're in Pennsylvania. What's it like?
So I guess I would preface this: what you see in the news isn't reality.
Really?
And coronavirus is a real disease. It is 100% a real disease. What's not true is what you're seeing all over in the media. The hospital wards aren't filled. They're not overflowing. We don't have people dying in hallways. This has become such a political issue, and it really should have never got into media. It never should have gotten into politics. They should have left this in the hands of doctors to essentially see who needs treated and who needs protected, because we know who needs protected: the patients that are high risk. We know that people need to socially distance right now. We're coming up on flu season, so hopefully all the measures that we're putting in place for coronavirus is going to quell the flu season. But the reality of it is it's a real disease, but it's taken such a political toll that the world really is being misinformed to so many different levels. And that's very unfortunate, because you have a lot of people out there scared. You have a lot of people out there suffering right now. Their businesses are suffering. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Families are being ruined. Kids are having nightmares. It's an absolute disaster what the media did to this disease process for their own personal gains.
Well, okay, so who do we listen to? I mean, where do we go to get the best information and know how to live our lives?
Sure, absolutely. It's very tough. And, the CDC still has good guidelines out there. A lot of people are manipulating those CDC guidelines. The World Health Organization still has decent guidelines out there. People like ZDogg do a good job as far as putting out information to, show the nuances. It's really important, though, that if any of the news outlets that you're watching, take with a grain of salt. The CNNs, the Fox, the this, the that, you have to take them with a grain of salt. The conservatives seem like they're very comfortable with the disease. The more liberals seem to be a little bit more concerned about the disease process. There's a group that's right in the middle, and I don't know what political party that is, but somebody in the middle. Essentially, they're kind of like, yeah, okay, this is real, but maybe not as bad, or maybe not as worse, or not maybe as mild. Again, it's a real disease process. We just have to make sure people keep their cool, socially distance when they need to socially distance, protect the elderly population, especially the elderly at-risk population, and not forget about people. Because right now in the United States, it's terrible. People are locked down in nursing homes, in skilled facilities, assisted living facilities. They can't see their kids, their grandkids.
And they can't have the people in the hospital with them when they're dying. I mean, to me, that's the worst right there. Well, I'm hopeful that it will calm down. I mean, what I'm observing is that at the beginning of it, everyone took it seriously, no matter what the political party was. I mean, you know, I was driving to the airport to the DFW, and I mean, nobody, this is in March, and nobody was on the freeway in the middle of the day. And now I just see people are trying to go back with their normal lives, and certainly they are here in Western Australia. And if it ever, I just think people can put their guard down and be so complacent, like it's not affecting me, it's not an issue, and I have all these economic issues, and I have all these emotional issues, and you know, I'm putting off this particular procedure and because of it. And I agree, it's going to be a new world when this is all over. And
Sure is.
survival of the fittest, you know. Be flexible, you know, just be as flexible as you can.
Yep. Again, I think people just need to realize real disease, and don't let your guard down. You know, do the smart things and essentially keep yourself safe.
Yeah. So if you're in a crowded space, wear a mask and wash your hands.
That's it. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. I know you've got a full day ahead of you, and thank you so much for just sharing with the audience. But I just love every time I have a time with you, and I always learn so much. And I appreciate what you're doing very, very much, just for the whole community in the world, that we're going to be safer because of MIDEO and you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And Terry, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to hit stop recording.